Recently, doctors in a Limerick hospital working in obstetrics and gynecology wrote up quite a shocking case study in the Journal of the Irish Medical Organisation, in which they said that failing to provide ultrasounds before abortion meant that women could die. Joining us on the line now to discuss this and more is Niamh Uí Bhriain from the Life Institute. Niamh, thank you so much for your time today.
Hello, how are you? Pleasure to be here.
Niamh, first of all, we've spoken before. Thank you again for your time. The Life Institute, just give us an understanding of your organisation and the work you do, if you would.
So, Arthur, I think as we've chatted about before on this programme, and thanks again to Life FM for giving people a chance to talk about this issue. Life Institute is a pro-life organisation. People would be familiar with things like the Rally for Life and big billboard campaigns and other initiatives that we do to try to rebuild the culture in Ireland, I think, since the 2008 referendum and the repeal of the eighth. So we're all about protecting both mother and child and trying to come back to a culture where both mother and baby are protected and the right to life is recognised.
Of course, it gives an understanding since, of course, the amendment was repealed some years ago. It gives an understanding in terms of the promises made, the assurances given in the run-up to the abortion referendum. There were various assurances given that the number of abortions would not increase in Ireland. How has that fared out?
Well, people might remember, Arthur, during the referendum, especially when it came down near and near to the actual day of the vote, that the electorate, who were kind of at this point shaking a little bit about whether or not to vote yes, and the opinion polls, I think, showed that quite clearly afterwards. People were wavering, I think, on the issue. And now, as it happened in the end, and a lot of scare tactics, I think, pushed the referendum over the. Sorry, can I start that again, Arthur? I think I've a tickle in my throat this morning. It's annoying me when I'm speaking. So I'll just start that again. Is that okay? Yeah, so people might remember, Arthur, in the run-up to the referendum, that there were a lot of promises made by Leo Varadkar, amongst others, and of course by the leading campaigners who were trying to persuade people that yes was the way to cast your vote in regard to the Eighth Amendment. They were trying to persuade people to repeal the Eighth Amendment. And one promise that was trotted out repeatedly was that abortion would be safe, legal and rare. And there was an emphasis on the rare. There was a particular emphasis on insisting that we would not see the kind of numbers that I think shocked people in when you quote numbers from countries like England or America, and that where you see these enormous abortion rates, one in 5, 1 in 4 babies are aborted, and I think those numbers kind of horrified people. So there was a reassurance given that Ireland would not become like that, and that abortion would, in Leo Varadkar's words, be safe, legal, and rare. And of course, what we saw immediately, very sadly, after the eighth was repealed, that when abortion was legalised, the numbers started to climb very radically, and less than 3,000 women travelled from Ireland for an abortion in 2018. In 2019, that had jumped up to 6,666 abortions performed here in Ireland. So really an extraordinary rise. And very sadly, that trend has continued. It looks now like, from information released to Carol Nolan, the independent TD, that 10,000 abortions were performed in 2023, like a really shocking, heartbreaking number. And I think a lot of people who voted yes, kind of with half a heart, the people who were persuaded to do so because they were told that otherwise women would die, which is untrue, of course, or, a lot of scaremongering went on around the time of the vote. I think they would look at those numbers and really, really think this is something that we were promised would not happen. Like, those numbers are heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, they are. It gives an understanding in terms of the care that's there for women at this point in time, in a very, very vulnerable condition, in a very vulnerable state, of course, who are looking for advice. What is it like, particularly, of course, the government's services, the government's delivery of service of information and options for women? What is it at this point in time?
Well, that's a really pertinent question, because if women are really given a choice, would the abortion numbers be going through the roof? Now, that's a fundamental question. When you're seeing rising abortion rates, and you're seeing them in other countries too. In Britain, at the time of the referendum, the abortion rates, which shocked people, was 1 in 5 babies there were aborted. That's now increased to 1 in 4 babies being aborted. So the situation there is getting worse, similar, just like what we're seeing here. And that, of course, begs the very obvious question. Why would women in very significantly increasing numbers keep opting for abortion when we know that it is not something any woman should ever have to undergo? or should ever feel that she has to undergo. Women, abortion should never be made to feel like it's the only choice that women have. But clearly women are being made to feel like that. So you'd have to question the government promises about counselling and about time and care being given to women, and women being made aware of other options. You'd have to really question if that's actually happening. And we know anecdotally, and from work done, I think, by Students for Life and others in calling some of these helplines, that in fact women feel absolutely rushed into this decision. And Gianna Care, which is a wonderful organisation helping women, has said, is gathering that anecdotal evidence from women that it is helping. Women who have undergone abortions, or women who have perhaps gone to a GP or elsewhere and looked to have a pregnancy confirmed, and who have described the idea of, who have said that the idea that counselling is offered is really ridiculous. They're in a very rushed consultation with a doctor or another care provider, and the adoption of abortion is immediately offered. And I would think that's anecdotal evidence, Arthur, but it's evidence that I think holds true, because we are seeing these numbers rising very, very fast. And of course, this new case brings us back to what Leo Varadkar promised when he said it would be safe, legal and rare, because what we are seeing increasingly is that the provision of abortion is not safe either. Obviously not safe for the baby, but according to this new case that's now been published in the Irish Medical Journal, it's also not safe for women.
Okay. At this point in time, there is more and more talk about the 2-day wait period, legislation changing the 2-day wait period. Give us an understanding. What's the latest on this? What is the reasons behind this? What's the latest?
So Life Institute has been campaigning for the last 2 years to ensure that the 3-day wait period before a woman can undergo an abortion is maintained. And if people aren't familiar with the process, usually if you go to a GP and you have your pregnancy confirmed and then you look for the abortion pill, you are required by law to wait for 3 days. And that's obviously a time to think. It's a time to think through this very momentous decision that you're going to undergo, because abortion kills a baby. Like, that's the reason. And one of the reassurances given by the government before the referendum, and this was a reassurance that was repeated by people like Simon Coveney, very senior people in Fine Gael, as a kind of and he's a local TD obviously there in Cork, it was a reassurance given to the electorate as part of the package, if you like, reassures that because abortion was such a serious decision, women would be given this time to think. They would be required to undergo a 3-day period of reflection. And what we saw immediately afterwards, of course, is that groups like the National Women's Council and TDs like Breed Smith have been pushing really hard to get rid of the 3-day wait. And the recent abortion review, which in my view was not an actual comprehensive review at all, but really, I think, an exercise in pushing forward these particular viewpoints, recommended that the 3-day waiting period be scrapped. And of course, if it is scrapped, then you will probably see the abortion numbers rising again, because, again, information released to Paddy Tobin TD and Karen Nolan TD has shown that a considerable number of women change their minds, perhaps up to 1,000 a year, change their minds during that 3-day waiting period. So the numbers are already terrible, Arthur. Like, the last thing we want is the numbers to increase more. And there isn't really any good reason, apart from this intense push to keep liberalising the abortion laws, to scrap the 3-day waiting period. I think most people listening to this programme, most people, in fact, who voted yes, would see it, anything that might help a woman to choose something other than abortion, as a good thing. Now, the only thing I will say is this, is that we have seen it, probably as a result of the awareness and the campaign and some of the pushback, that within the political parties, particularly Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, they are saying at cabinet level even, look, if we change this, we are breaking a promise we made to the electorate in 2018. And I think, given this big pushback we've just seen in the referendums, on March the 8th, this landslide double no against all the odds, like a real David versus Goliath, I suppose, result there on March the 8th, it might give the government pause, eager as they are to always do the bidding of NGOs like the National Women's Council or abortion campaigners who seem to have open access to the corridors of power in Leinster House. I think the result of those referendums has made them aware that in their kind of galloping pursuit of the Liberal agenda, they're misreading the Irish electorate. And the Irish electorate are nowhere near as far down the road in pursuit of the woke agenda as a lot of politicians thought they were. And that they are certainly not as liberal around issues like keeping mothers in the Constitution or abortion as these NGOs might have led TDs and cabinet ministers to believe that they are. So I think that might give them pause now. And I think, when you join that with the campaign that's ongoing, and we're encouraging people always, like ring your TD and tell them not to break the promise made in 2018, we might see some good results there.
Indeed. I want to move on now to a story recently of a lady, of course, who became quite ill as a result of mishandling and indeed mistreatment. She attended a hospital, I understand it was a ectopic pregnancy. Give us an understanding of what happened there. First of all, perhaps before we get to that, you might give us a bit of a background in terms of what is a ectopic pregnancy.
Yeah, so this story, Arthur, and thank you for giving your listeners the opportunity to hear about it, because apart from Gript Media, who broke the story, it has been completely ignored by all of the media platforms around the country, and it should be headline news. And here's why. It's a story that I think peels back our understanding of why providing an ultrasound before an abortion is so important. An ectopic pregnancy occurs where the baby develops somewhere outside of the womb, usually in the fallopian tube, sometimes in another cavity, but almost all of the time where the baby develops instead of in the womb in the fallopian tube. And of course, the fallopian tube is too small to continue to hold the developing baby. So at a certain point, the fallopian tube will burst. And if that happens, it's, as Dr. Trevor Hayes says, it's a real gynecological emergency. And if you don't treat women in time, if they don't get to the hospital in time, if treatment is not performed in time, women can die, because you would have a huge amount of blood loss, and that can just tip into an incredibly dangerous situation. So the problem arises here is that the first signs of an ectopic pregnancy are lower abdominal pain and bleeding, vaginal bleeding. And of course, they are also symptoms of taking the abortion pill. And pro-life doctors and nurses were aware of this, and they were aware of the very significant risk of a woman who has an ectopic pregnancy, but doesn't realize it, because you need an ultrasound, obviously, to see if you have an ectopic pregnancy, then takes abortion pills prescribed by her GP, because that's what's happening under the current abortion regime, and confuses the symptoms of taking the abortion pill with the symptoms of the ectopic pregnancy. And because pro-life doctors and pro-life TDs were aware that this was a very significant risk, they asked Simon Harris in 2018, when he was bringing the abortion legislation before the Dáil, to ensure that any woman who was being prescribed abortion pills would get an ultrasound first. And that amendment was really shouted down in the Dáil. And the people who proposed the amendment, who was Karen Nolan TD who proposed it, and the other pro-life TDs, were subjected to absolute vitriol in the Dáil for even suggesting this entirely sensible amendment to safeguard women's lives. So Simon Harris at the time said it would be a terrible use, I'm quoting his actual words there, a terrible use of what people rightly point out is a scarce resource in the health service. That's what he said in response to Carol Nolan. The current health minister also kind of went on with a whole lot of raw meat about dragging Ireland back to dark times and stuff like this, when clearly this was the amendment that Nolan had suggested in relation to providing ultrasounds was about preserving women's lives and ensuring that ectopic pregnancies were spotted. So that's not what, since 2019 then, since abortion has become legal, Arthur, ultrasounds are not provided if you are prescribed abortion pills. And in last month, March, the Irish Medical Journal, which is probably the leading peer-reviewed medical journal in Ireland, had published a case study which was written up by medical experts who work in obstetrics and gynecology in Limerick Maternity Hospital. And they wrote up a really shocking case where they said a woman had sought and been prescribed abortion pills, had taken the abortion pills, had an ectopic pregnancy, of course, didn't realise she had an ectopic pregnancy because she wasn't provided with an ultrasound. She then did confuse the abdominal pain and the vaginal bleeding she was experiencing, which was because of her ectopic pregnancy, but she thought that was occurring because she had taken the abortion pills. That went on for almost 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after taking the abortion pills. She was rushed to Limerick Maternity Hospital, arrived in an ambulance. This was an absolute emergency. She was suffering from very severe bleeding and severe blood loss. She needed immediate resuscitation. In other words, she almost died. Now, they managed to save her life in Limerick Hospital, and then the medics wrote up this case and published it in the Irish Medical Journal. And when they do that, they're like, medics write up these cases to, first of all, educate each other, to let each other see, other medics see, where things can be improved, where things have worked, where more research is needed. And sometimes it's a cautionary tale. Like they were saying that this is something we need to know. Obviously, it's also a message to the authorities, to the medical authorities, the HSE, the Department of Health, the Minister for Health, that this is ringing an alarm bell in relation to maternal mortality. The title of the case study is actually Medical Termination of Pregnancy, an Emerging Risk for Maternal Mortality. And the medics are really clear, like from the introduction onwards, they are really clear about this. Like they couldn't be more clear in their message to the minister. They're saying that offering an ultrasound to check for ectopic pregnancy before giving abortifacients, the abortion pill, is not routine. And they say that this practice, the practice of not offering the ultrasound, means that the symptoms of ectopic pregnancy and the symptoms of having an abortion can be masked, and that can be masked. In other words, they can be confused with each other, and that this will result in women dying. It will result in mortality. It will result in maternal deaths. So this is a case, Arthur, that should be ringing loud alarm bells everywhere. It is absolutely extraordinary that the rest of the media is choosing to ignore it. I know that Fatima Gunning of Gript Media has written to Simon Harris and written to Stephen Donnelly and asked them what are they going to do, what actions are they going to take based on this case study that's been published in the Irish Medical Journal, and they have not replied to her yet. Trevor Hayes, a senior obstetrician gynecologist, very well known consultant, he is saying that immediate action needs to be taken, that this needs to be urgently reviewed, and that ultrasounds must be provided. Otherwise, he said it's only a matter of time before women die. And Nurses for Life, I know, and Doctors for Life have joined this call as well. They're saying a very particular point Trevor Hayes made, which I thought was so clear and important. He said that the original decision in 2018 by Simon Harris not to provide ultrasounds, he felt that was more a political decision than a medical one. And he said that has to be reversed. It's a very urgent issue. Otherwise, it's only a matter of time before women die. We have to provide ultrasounds before giving abortion pills. And of course, he's entirely right there, Arthur, because the real reason abortion campaigners do not want to provide ultrasounds is because they don't want women perhaps to see the baby or to hear the heartbeat. And to me, that's extraordinary. Like, what about women making a full and informed choice? What about, women having the right to know? Surely they have the right to know the full picture. Like, surely they shouldn't be denied evidence or denied a scan. And in particular, surely the risk to women's safety, the risk of them actually dying because of a missed ectopic pregnancy, surely that's more important than the political desire for not to have them see their baby on an ultrasound.
Interesting. That's a very interesting point indeed. Simon Harris, give us an understanding. Simon has had various viewpoints on abortion over the years. Speak to us about this.
So I think Simon Harris's position when the amendment, when the referendum was going through, and then when the legislation was brought before the Dáil, because he brought it as Minister for Health, obviously, I think it's fair to say, and anyone looking back on the Oireachtas committee hearings and on the debates in the Dáil and the Seanad at the time, would have to agree that he was very, very hostile to any pro-life amendments. Like, none of them were permitted. And the other TDs in the Dáil, I'm thinking of people like Kate O'Connell, I'm thinking of Sinn Féin TDs like Louise O'Reilly, were extraordinarily aggressive and hostile to pro-life TDs in those debates. Like, really, I think that the rules of debate in terms of showing respect or not thinking the worst of those who have different views to yours just went out the window in that period. There was a horrible sense of triumphalism and a sense that no pro-life amendment would be allowed. And coming back to this again, Arthur, a woman nearly died in Limerick Hospital. If that pro-life amendment, which was put forward by Carol Nolan, had been taken on board by Simon Harris, this problem would most likely, very, very likely, would not have happened to this woman. But other women are still in danger. Ectopic pregnancy isn't as rare as people think. Like Trevor Hayes says, 1 in every 80 pregnancies is ectopic. If we're seeing 8,000 to 10,000 abortions every year, we're seeing perhaps 100 or more of these cases a year where a woman is taking abortion pills, but it's actually an ectopic pregnancy, so the baby's in the fallopian tubes, and these symptoms can be mixed up. They can be the symptom of one can mask the expected symptoms of one can mask the other. So it's an incredibly, incredibly serious issue, and like personally, I feel like it has to be talked about until the minister listens and until the authorities take this on board. Or the next headline you're going to see in the Irish Medical Journal, or perhaps you will see in RT or Irish Times, is that a woman has died.
It's quite an interesting environment we live in. Just to finish up, Niamh, give us an understanding. What would you say to anybody who claims that, who make the statement that our organisations and people like yourself coming from the Life Institute are hateful, anti-women, right-wing, bigoted, religious zealots? What would you say to such people?
Well, I would ask them to read this article in the Irish Medical Journal. There's a link to it in my piece on Gript if they want to go and look at it themselves. And the medical experts who wrote up, and again, as I say, they work in obstetrics and gynecology in the maternity hospital in Limerick. They are writing this because they are concerned women are going to die. I am writing about it because I'm concerned women are going to die. And because I oppose this political decision to refuse to allow women to hear or see their baby on an ultrasound, in case, because I can't see any other reason for that, in case it might change their mind about abortion. I don't think abortion serves women. I don't think anybody in any pro-life group in this country or any other country thinks that abortion helps women. And I think that we know, and I know this is correlation and not causation, but it's still significant to me that there are increasing rates of hurt and depression and anxiety amongst young women. And I have to say, I think that the kind of culture that abortion creates, where life is throwaway, where women are told they have a choice, but really they don't, because they're not being given the support that they need or the respect that they need to be able to continue with their pregnancies, you have to wonder how any of this is good for women, especially young women. It's a travesty, obviously, for every baby. Every abortion kills a baby. Like it's a fact that I think we forget too easily. There's that horrible reality that the HSE had on their website until very recently, when they were advising women who took abortion pills to flush what they call the pregnancy remains, but which is, of course, a small unborn baby down the toilet. But there's that horrible, horrible reality which respects neither mother nor baby, and it's creating a culture which I think is really broken and needs to be rebuilt.
As you were speaking there, I reminded of the time that my first son, indeed my two sons, were in the womb, but I remember the first son in particular, we were lying there looking at my wife's belly, and I remember seeing quite a large bump, and I remember seeing a foot suddenly appear. And sometimes it just hit me for the first time there was a human being in there. But of course there was all along. But nevertheless, the fact that I was able to actually interact and I was actually able to poke this foot and the foot would retract and the foot would come forward. It was almost like I was having a game of football with this young boy still in the womb. But it's amazing how people can view things and even give things different labels to dehumanize and so forth. But it's interesting. Niamh Uí Bhriain from the Life Institute. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Always a pleasure, Arthur. What a lovely story. What a lovely memory for your wife and yourself.
Indeed it is.
Gorgeous. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Niamh. God bless. Bye now.